2. Oh, it went fast this time. Good morning, everybody. A marvelous Friday morning to everybody out there. I know I had mentioned there was a little bit of back and forth about whether or not we'd be doing this yesterday evening. I kind of bit the bullet and decided, well, let's go ahead and hold off for Friday morning. We did have quite the extravagant NOAA update in terms of the hurricane season. We officially have their forecast, and I want to say if there were any official sources out there that you'd at least want to put a small vote of confidence in, despite everybody shouting in your faces at this point in time, active season, at least give NOAA their good graces and, take a look at what they have, and we'll actually get you up to speed on it if you are not familiar with the specifics on their forecast. But happy Friday, everybody. It feels weird this week, to tell you the truth. I've been pulled in several different directions. Started off the week on a personal note, had some time off, extended from last weekend, had a lot of home projects to work on, content to create. Then I was with the Navy for the last couple of days, and now we're back here on the home front. Just got a solid workout in. I apologize if you guys see me chewing on some Greek yogurt here. I need a little protein. It's definitely much needed after a workout that I had. It was my favorite workout of the week, too, pull. I love doing back, throwing a little bit of glutes in there, especially for your bent over movements. It was a good time. But welcome, everybody. I hope you've had a spectacular week. Weather Center Willow, for those of you wondering, is in fact here. She knew we were going live this morning, so she was gracious enough to come and join us today and relax on her father's lap as we talk a little bit about the tropics. Kevin McGinn, hello there from Upper Tampa Bay. Good to see you. Richard Perez, also a big thanks to Richard Perez for the $5 donation. I can sincerely say that means a tremendous amount. Before the live stream even got started, that is such a humbling feeling. You guys are willing to make a gracious donation like that before I even spit anything out. For all we know, this could be the worst live stream on the planet, the worst live stream for this channel's record, but you guys are lovely enough of a crowd to donate to the channel, and I really appreciate that for certain, especially as we continue to try to grow the community, our viewer base. Tommy, welcome in. Dan Denton, I absolutely agree. It does feel like summer. I think it was either yesterday or the day before yesterday. I was driving down I-4, and I had said out loud to myself, because my car still doesn't have AC, unfortunately. I have not fixed it yet. Haven't had the time, unfortunately. Haven't had the finances, and as we all know, working on a V6 engine bay, you got very little room, so I haven't had the time to try to tinker with it myself. And I remember out loud almost yelling, this is not spring anymore. This is summer. When my dashboard says 93, 94 degrees, that ain't spring anymore. We are jumping full force into summer. Everything is coming right at us very quickly. We are already there. Richard, welcome in. Kevin Rivera, thank you very much for joining us from good old Puerto Rico. Coney, thank you. Smoking Swamp Outdoors. Skywarn Spotter here in Dunedin, Florida. Oh, well, very good. Thank you very much for joining us today. James, first wave of the season, fairly impressive. It actually has been. Yeah, we still have some pretty good organized convection out there. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in. Twilight Firefly, hello there. Zenful, welcome in. So this has been the talk of the tropical town for the last couple of days. And, I was definitely sitting here thinking, please, NHC, don't highlight it. Don't highlight it. You are going to open the social media floodgates if you highlight this feature. And then everybody is going to be talking about how the season has started. The season's here. First tropical storm. It's going to be Vince all over again. And they did it. They gave it that token 10% chance of development. I don't even know why they did that. It's not going to play a role to anybody's weather. It looks like we could take a very close graze, get a little bit of that westward side thunderstorm activity, some increased rainfall and winds for Bermuda up there as it continues to push off towards the east-northeast like so. But at this point in time, if you looked at the satellite and thought any which way but not tropical, I would question where it is that you're getting your information from, because this screams jet supported 110%. Look at all this dry air that is just moving in across the state of Florida, giving us our very, very hot temperatures. The Bahamas are quiet. Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Cuba is finally seeing a return to pleasant weather. Might see some elevated winds on the backside of that trough axis as it digs its way south, but I'll change the color of the ink here, and you guys can see for yourselves. Look at how this trough digs all the way down to Central America and just rips everything up from the southwest all the way up towards the northeast. This is exactly what we saw, if you guys remember, with Philippe. Last hurricane season, it came up out of the Gulf, not the Gulf of Mexico, out of the Caribbean Sea, It encountered a jetmax that was coming across the deep south thanks to our El Nino, and as soon as it hit that jetmax, Philippe was more or less bonked out to sea, and we were left with that baroclinic-looking frontal system that everyone thought was Philippe that got sucked up towards the northeast and ended up just being a very, very big rain and wind maker for the northeast and eastern Canada. So a very similar situation that we have going on here right now. ITCZ is finally seeing a little bit of an increase in activity in our thunderstorm coverage down over this area of the chart. I can move my head out of the way so you guys can see a little bit better. There we go. I'll put myself down where there really isn't much happening. ITCZ is looking fairly impressive today. Nothing organized. We do have our little tropical wave still working her way through, his way through, however you want to describe it. Let's not name it its way through. Moving off towards the west-northwest. And this is for my viewers out there in the Windward Islands, down in through here, as well as anybody who may actually be tuning in from the Guianas, from Venezuela, the ABC Islands, right in through here. This is something we're going to have to watch as we wander our way through June, because if you guys have been watching our updates routinely, what's going to happen with our convergence zone is we're slowly going to get a bit of a bend, a bit of concavity up in this direction, so any bit of energy, whether it be just general thunderstorm, moisture, rainfall, or tropical waves, are going to be guided right along the northern South America coastline directly into the Windward Islands, across the ABC Islands, and into our central Gulf of Mexico, where it may try to do something. Obviously, that's not what we're forecasting here, but just letting you know that your rain chances are going to continue to go up as we go over the coming weeks. Not now, not immediately. As this tropical wave comes through, you're going to see your first dose of increased rainfall. Trinidad, Tobago, Barbados, our southern leeward, southern Lesser Antilles, ABC Islands, the northern coastlines of Venezuela, getting a lot of that thunderstorm activity into the Guianas for sure. And even parts of interior South America are starting to see a little bit of bleed over that vorticity that comes off our convergence zone. Incognito, thank you very much for the wonderful $2 donation. I do appreciate it, and thank you for joining us today. Do you think if it develops that they'll give it a name? This guy out here, Dan, the one that's moving into the western central Atlantic, just for clarification, this one, because it is not going to develop. I'll tell you that right now. That's why I was a little disappointed that NHC pulled a fast one on us, just like they did last year, where we're just starting to stamp things for the heck of it. And the main reason I don't like that they do that, I get why. I understand the reasoning, because I've been there where I've had to draw charts, issue charts. I did that for many years in the Air Force, where we had to draw synoptic scale or macro scale charts highlighting certain features, drawing certain features in for the sake of putting it on the chart. But the main reason I'm so against it is not because it doesn't make sense, but because I know social media is going to just fire up. Social media is going to go crazy. Everyone's going to talk a whole bunch of, oh man, Alberto, tropical disturbance. We've already had people calling this a tropical wave, and it just goes to show the misinformation that's flying around is already chaotic, and we have not technically hit the hurricane season yet. That is not a tropical wave. Our first, as the analysts, the official synoptic analysts have proclaimed, our first tropical wave is down here. This is not a tropical feature. I've been seeing tropical disturbance, tropical cyclone. Just no, stop. And I really don't think this is going to get a name. If it does suddenly get a name, that would be a shock and awe. I will just shut down this channel because apparently I don't know what I'm talking about. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. If this were to take on some form of subtropical characteristics enough to warrant a name, then yes, they would give it Alberto, the A-letter name, or the A-named storm of the 2024 list. Man, guys, I'm sorry. I always do that. Whenever Willow sits on me, I get hair all up in my nose, and then it's just bothering me for the rest of the live stream. You know, main models, I have to say, are technically doing okay. How close are we? Welcome in. Extreme Weather Chaser Theo. They mentioned maybe a subtropical. Yeah, and we'll get into that here in a moment. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and move on. So this is what we have on the NHC homepage this morning. There she is, or he is, it is. I keep doing that, and I've actually had people confront me for doing that. I don't know why. Forgive me for assuming a storm's gender, but this is disturbance numero uno, chance of cyclone formation in the next 7 days, and even in their discussion here, a trough of low pressure. They're not mentioning anything in terms of organized tropical energy. There really isn't anything tropical about this. That's why, as Extreme Weather Chaser Theo has mentioned in the chat, They may try to watch if it develops subtropical characteristics, but there's zero, zilch, nada. Nothing tropical about this feature, and that's why I was against them highlighting it. Still given the 10-10 ratio, 48 hours, 10% chance formation over the next 7 days, 10% chance, and that is likely going to drop to 0 now that even our GFS, that lovely model, has dropped confidence in terms of it actually organizing and consolidating any further than what we saw on the satellite. The big area that we're really going to talk about in this video is not only what's coming out of the ITCZ in terms of if we're going to be seeing more robust waves as we wander through June, but also this general area right in through here. Because the ensemble models or the ensembles are really starting to highlight more activity, more agreement anyways, not activity, but more agreement as we move through June. This is going to be the area to watch, whether it be stuff that bleeds into the Eastern Pacific and becomes Aletta, or if things get pulled up in this sort of a fashion and becomes Alberto. Now, I made sure to change my thumbnail this morning because I had a yellow thing drawn in right here, and I didn't want to miscommunicate anything with anybody. That is what I'm watching and the general trends that the models have indicated, but I changed that. I didn't want to make it seem clickbaity at all. Shout out to the person who called me out on my community post yesterday when I mentioned extraordinary, because they did mention in the NOAA briefing that they are looking at a potentially extraordinary season. I was told I was doomcasting. I don't know. I didn't write it in MLA or APA format. I apologize, but shout out to the person who did call me out so I can back up my source, back up my evidence, and show you guys we mean business on this channel. I'm not just making stuff up for the fun of it. Plus, it was a community post. I can understand a little bit more so if it were a video, a short, or a live stream where I was saying extreme, extraordinary, hype, etc., then get mad at me. But this was literally the first note that I took when watching their discussion yesterday. We're looking at a potentially extraordinary season this year. And here it is. This is their 2024 hurricane season outlook, at 85% chance that we are going to have an above normal season. I will once again go ahead and reorient my head so you guys can see. For the Atlantic, above normal season, 17 to 25 named storms. Now, I will admit, that is a really big margin of error. I will admit. Like, they do mention up here, for example, that there is an 85% chance. We're almost near the point where we can say guaranteed an above average season, but this named storm spread seems pretty immense if you think about it. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. We have a margin of error of 8 storms. So maybe they're confident, but they're not 100% confident, as the above normal percentage indicates. 8 to 13 hurricanes has been the general consensus, so definitely on board with that. 4 to 7 major hurricanes. The 4 to 7 major hurricanes was actually really in line with what we were thinking here on the channel, if you guys remember. We had mentioned that we could see between 4 to 7 or 4 to 6. I believe my official number was about 6 major hurricanes. This is what everybody is talking about, though, the accumulated cyclone energy. 150 to 245% greater than what we see on average. So that's the big one. And for you guys who may struggle with ACE, it's not acing a test or acing an exam. What they mean by ACE is accumulated cyclone energy in terms of organized systems, strong systems, long track systems. Essentially, ACE, as the name implies, is a total accumulation of how strong, how impactful, how long duration storms we have across the entirety of the Atlantic, not just the Caribbean, not just the Gulf, not just the MDR, not even just the tropics. This is for the Atlantic. So this could be like Don last year, where we had Don all the way up almost into the mid-latitudes, headed for the poles. He would technically contribute to our ACE score for the year, even though it's not, in the tropics, not moving west, not hitting anybody. It would still go into the full ACE accumulation for the calendar year, or the calendar hurricane season. And one thing, I'm going to put a star right here, not because of the severe weather in the plains, that has been an onslaught in of itself, but I'm putting a star to the side of the chart because they're also more or less playing around with the hypothesis that we could potentially see an increase, or not an increase, but a subtle extension to our hurricane season. they're actually tossing that idea around, and I've seen a few other big name sources on the X, the old Twitter, mentioning that we could maybe see a bit, just a bit, not going into January, but we could see an extension of our hurricane season, and that could mean a variety of things as well, guys. Don't take that as we're going to add the full month of December, we'll be ending hurricane season on New Year's Eve. That's not what we're saying, but more or less seeing systems possibly bleed through the month of November. If you remember last year, we did have PTC 22, which is where our favorite Vince Insider from my longtime viewers on here came from, but it never manifested itself. An extension of the hurricane season would mean that even though we're all familiar with that graphic to where August it starts to go up, 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 then the first couple weeks of September we're at the peak, and then down into October it goes back down, they're thinking that that peak could maybe come down at a bit more of a gradual descent as opposed to that steep decline that we see as we get ready for November. So that's something they're toying around with as well, that we might actually see some decently organized name systems through the month of November. It may try to trickle into December, but that's definitely up in the air. That is once again back into speculation land. This was more or less a discussion. I'm not going to go through this for the sake of time, but this is for your situational awareness. I'll move my head out of the way once again and one last time and move the screen over so you guys can see a little bit more. If you're very curious at reading their entire discussion, or at least skimming it, kind of broad brushing it, getting the Cliff Notes version of it, this is found on Climate Prediction Center, issued yesterday, 23 May 2024, and this is a full breakdown of everything that they more or less discussed yesterday, as well as their references, the forecasters who put it together, and all the specifics as to what it is that we've been talking about and all the sensationalism surrounding this hurricane season. So I'm not going to go through this very heavily, but this is where you can find it. cpc.ncep.noaa.gov, Hurricane Outlooks. Now, let's get into the juicy bits. So, we have continued to watch the Southern Caribbean, the Western Caribbean, near Central America for our gyre. Not only a combination of our overall generalized low-pressure spin out there, but our upper-level anticyclone, our Madden-Julian oscillation, our convective pulses moving in, if you can imagine, off of the East Pacific. And, nothing alarming, nothing very concerning, but I am noticing that if you fast forward to the very tail end of May, we still have some shading down in here. We have some very consistent shading down here. And in fact, this is probably the first model run where we have not gone any of these panels. It starts at 3 days from now, 72 hours, and goes all the way up to 288 hours. This is probably one of the first European probability loops that have not dropped the probabilities altogether on a panel or two. If you go back, for example, on 12Z yesterday, you notice that we kind of lose a little bit of that agreement for a couple of panels. In fact, it still looked fairly organized. If you go back to 0Z and you look through, notice how we lose a lot of agreement. For example, on this, we're just left with our milky 5%, and then it comes back slowly but surely, and then we start to lose it again. We're starting to maintain confidence, and as you notice, the European model is very conservative. But this is exactly why I wanted to draw the thumbnail that I did, because if you look at our tropical depression probabilities, they kind of do something like this. They kind of do something like this, and they do something like this with a little bit of that energy bleed over into the Eastern Pacific. So that's why I was thinking about maybe drawing something on my thumbnail indicating this and indicating this as our two possible modes for my severe weather fans out there as to what could possibly happen. European ensembles are very, very back and forth. The Euro ensembles are why everybody that I know who really looks at this stuff is not confident at all. I'd be lying to you guys if I said I'm very confident this is happening. No, I'm just on the fence. I'm still playing that devil's advocate role, going back and forth. I learned a lot of lessons last year, getting excited about things, and then they not coming to fruition. So this time, I'm showing you guys the information, I'm presenting it, and I'm explaining both sides of the coin. This is what would happen if it formed. This is what would happen entirely. Nothing would happen if it doesn't form. So yesterday at 12 Zulu, it was getting a little interesting out there in the Caribbean. If you watch down in that general source region, look at our little bit of ensemble probabilities coming up, trying to form not only a tropical storm, but there was actually one member, I don't know where this came from, but one member, very interesting, had dropped all the way down to the sub 950s. And the only reason I bring that up is because this is our European model. This is the European ensemble. And we typically don't see that very often, our rogue members that go all the way to Cat 3, Cat 4 territory. But notice there was a bit of agreement. And then if you come over to 0Z, again, per usual, I don't know what's going on with this model, but it drops a lot of confidence. We still get a few ensemble members out there, but they're kind of all over the place. We have a large margin of error this now, but still trying to hint at maybe some subtle thinking, not agreement. In this case, we'll say model thinking that this is an area to watch. And that's kind of the puzzle pieces that I put together, or the context clues I take away from this. If we have, out of our 51 members of the European model, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish, 6, we'll say, indicating that, hey, we could see low pressure development, then what that tells me is this is simply an area to monitor for agreement, for more of a consensus, for an upping of our probabilities. It's a target area for just monitoring, researching, etc., doing some extra homework in the background. The GFS, on the other hand, has been just throwing this in our faces. It's been crumpling it up and throwing it right at us like, hey, because if you come through all of our ensembles, and this is also worth noting, if you look, we see development of something as early as only about 138 to 144 hours in the loop. So for my guys out there, for my folks in general, that love to say, GFS past 200 hours, throw it out. This is well within that 200-hour threshold. I'm just throwing that out there. Again, I'm not very confident. Just worth noting for the people who love to, it's there, but, well, in this case, that's one but that you can throw out the window. And we've had great ensemble agreement that something's going to try to sneak its way out of the Caribbean. And if you notice, I want to say this is almost all of our ensemble members giving us a spread like this, because the GFS only has, I believe, around 30 or 31 ensemble members with the GEFS, the Global Ensemble Forecast System. And if you look, there's quite a consensus, and it's not being very bullish either. We're looking at maybe a tropical depression, low-end tropical storm trying to maybe squeak up towards that high-end TS status or low-end hurricane, with a few of those rogue ensembles that we saw in the European model as well, trying to get into Category 2 or greater. If we come on over to our let me go back in time, show you another run as well. If you go to the 0Z, the 0Z looks even more concerning. The 0 Zulu model has a lot more member agreement indicating Category 2 storm or greater, and a bit more of a concentration of them as well, pointing towards southern Florida, the Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, and Jamaica. So key takeaway here, folks, for those of you who are still watching, for those of you who will rewatch this, I'm not getting you alarmed. I'm not trying to get you excited that there will be Alberto knocking on your doorstep. It is just worth keeping one eye open, taking a look behind your back, or watching around every now and again, and not wandering into the month of June like, it's going to be 2023 all over again. You know what I mean? That's all. This is an area that was untapped last year, so I'm going to pay careful attention to the Caribbean this year, because once that area does become a lot more favorable, we could see some very rapidly intensifying storms. And that's another, I guess you could say, tightrope that I'm going to be watching and walking as we go through this hurricane season. Last year, we had the ingredients for very quickly and explosively developing cyclones, but El Nino was the huge caveat to that. This year, whether we stay in a cool, neutral, weak La Nina, or even try to get into that moderate La Nina territory, we'll have weakened trade winds, we'll have weakened wind shear, and more rising motion over these areas that were not touched last year. So that's another thing that's just floating around in the back of my mind, is if I do see consensus that something's going to develop, I may want to emphasize a little bit greater to you viewers out there, for my Cayman folks, Jamaica folks, everybody out there in the Caribbean, if something does finally consolidate, it could consolidate very quickly. And I don't have my notebook here, but yesterday during NOAA's discussion, they also went on to mention that rapid intensification is on their radar a little bit more than the numbers are. And I'm so happy they said that. All these other sources, all the other groups I've been seeing, all the other tropical sources, YouTube, X, whatever you want to put on the table, have been talking numbers. In my opinion, I fully agree with NOAA, and I've been saying the same thing, so it makes me feel humbly satisfied that the professionals said the exact same words. We're more concerned about storms moving into areas and rapidly intensifying. So that's, why are we lagging just now? I saw some lag on the YouTube stream. That was weird. But that's my biggest concern, which is why I bring attention to stuff like this. If we do, let's say hypothetically, get a cyclone and the area is more or less favorable, we could see it go from a weak disturbance depression up to a nice tropical storm, potentially a hurricane if it's not moving fast enough, fairly quickly. So that's something that we'll need to pay attention to as we move through the hurricane season. Now getting into the GEFS control precipitable water, I'm only bringing this up because, as you can see, it has been very, very, I guess you could say, just very motivated to try to spin something up out of the Caribbean and move it right over top Jamaica, Cayman Islands, and up through the Bahamas. If you go back to 0Z this morning, same thing. Pretty consistent, a little bit more organized. If you go back to 18 Zulu, bring it in, and there she goes again. There he goes again. Exactly the same path. Exactly the same path. You go back to 12 Zulu, still there. Pretty much the exact same path. So GFS naturally has its biases. It naturally has its weird tendencies. It has its little hype moments, but we're definitely watching its ensembles. And even as you go through the ensemble members here, if you come up to that left-hand side, the control member, the control model, which is the more than likely outcome, I know Weatherman Plus likes to say that as well. It is true. Your control member, as the name implies, is your most stratified, your most streamlined model representative of your group of ensembles. And the GFS ensemble does suck something out of the Caribbean, bring it up towards Jamaica. It looks to dodge Florida, but we're still in that margin of error. For example, if I zoom the things in, and you guys pay attention to, for example, E13, 14, and 15 right here, and we go a little back in time, notice that all three, 13, 14, and 15, bring this into the Miami-Fort Lauderdale area. So again, not extremely concerning, not something that I'm very conscious of, not something that I'm going to start blasting out repetitive updates on, like, hey, get ready, start preparing. I mean, yes, you should be prepared always, but we're not going to jump the gun just yet. We're almost there. We're almost there to where we can start jumping the gun. If you come here and look at our vorticity, this is something we like to bring up quite a bit as we're wandering into the hurricane season. I've presented it to you guys a number of times, and as we get more and more updates, the European ensembles for our upper-level rising motion or just difluent flow, rising air, or instability that could help to generate these cyclones is still ready to rock and roll once we cross into hurricane season. This is your June 1st time frame, and as you wander through the month of June from about here and down, is our Atlantic AOR. And notice we have very, very small areas of unfavorable sinking air subsidence, however you want to look at it. But we have a large pocket of very, very good vertical velocities. This, I believe, is your MJO and your CAG trying to establish itself, the gyre down there in the Southern Caribbean, Central America area, right about where the models are all thinking we could see something right there from about June 6th, June 7th, till maybe the 21st of June. We might see a little bit of an increase in activity. MDR may try to spit something out too, pending the Saharan dust. You come over to the CFS. CFS is in full agreement with that. You notice we have that downward forcing the subsidence, and then that very quickly gives way to positive anomalies out there pretty much through the duration of the month of June. We try to stabilize ourselves a little bit going towards the 3rd and 4th week of June, and then the tail end into July becomes a lot more favorable across much of our Atlantic basin. So lots of other variables we'll have to watch for, but for all intents and purposes, in terms of just that uppermost portion of our atmosphere, our environment, as we'd like to say, could be game on. We could check the box there and say, okay, we're getting closer to opening up our tropical basin for something to try to come out and, play. This is, I'm just going to go ahead and skip ahead and get to the close one, the close-up image of our Caribbean, because this is also something that's very... I got to give the credits of the GEPS for sure. I got to give the Canadian ensembles its credits. Because when we started this YouTube channel last year, it was more or less the Canadian ensembles first, then the GFS, and then our other models like the Icon, and the Euro was last to finally play ball. It was the Canadian ensembles, or were, I should say, the correct pronunciation, that keyed me big time into Idalia. And for my faithful viewers who are watching from day one, literally, it was the Canadian ensembles that brought my eyes in on what Idalia was going to do. Start off in the Eastern Pacific, it pulled across Central America, and then end up in our Caribbean, and lo and behold, that was our major hurricane of the year. So I do put a bit more allegiance into the Canadian models here, or the Canadian ensembles, because they've done well, they've proven themselves to me, and the only reason I'm putting a little bit more energy into explaining this for you guys is I'm noticing a rapidly expanding signal down there in the Caribbean. So if you watch, remember this, June 6th, June 7th, maybe even just before that, we begin to open up the upper levels for development. And check this out. So look at the timestamp at the top there. We have Monday, June 3rd, there's the 4th, there's the 5th, and then here comes the 6th. And notice how look at this. I don't know. Personally, I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if this is our gyre starting to turn on and we're more or less just going to get a larger area of low pressure. But at the same time, these, I guess you could call them, I'm not going to call them velocity anomalies, but these pressure anomalies right in through here are ensemble member pressure centers. These get pretty low. There's an 89 millibar right here, or a 989 millibar right there, 1004 right here. This would be somewhere in that same general realm between the 990s, the 980s. Here's a 997. And this has been slowly but surely really expanding. And the Canadian ensembles did a phenomenal job last year with our systems. And they really did. If you look back through all of our videos and other sources, when the Canadian ensembles were very back and forth, nothing happened. If you remember with the 7 iterations of Vince that we had through October and November, the ensembles for the Canadian model were very, very wishy-washy. We never saw anything really staring us in the face that were just kind of saying, hey, tropical development, watch this area. In this case, that is a huge spread of agreement. In fact, this is like a blanketing of possible agreement. It could go either way. I don't know if this is a model bias, if this is a vorticity bias or not. It remains to be seen, but all I know is it is trending. You go back to 12Z, there she is, big time. Go back to 0Z, there she is, big time. Once again, you go back to 12Z, big time. You go back to, let me see, that's May 12th or May 22nd. Let's go back to 12Z on Tuesday. There it is. You go back to 0Z on the 21st. There it is. You go back to 12Z on the 20th. There it is. So we've been trending very, 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 very consistently. And this lines up really well with the time frame that we could start to see our upper level conditions really begin to make way for potential cyclone development. So we have lots and lots of run-to-run consistency with our ensembles. In fact, I'll even go further back, 12Z on the May 19th. If you look, we are just finally squeaking into that threshold. This is June 4th, 12 Zulu, and we're starting to see a reflection of that. You go back even further than that to 0Z on the 19th, still seeing some weak indications. Something might try to sneak its way out of there with our Eastern Pacific starting to activate a little bit as well. So we have, let me see, this is 0Z on the 19th. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 consecutive ensemble member model runs showing something. So if you were looking for run-to-run consistency, there it is. And like I said, this is only my personal opinion, not a professionally proven statistic, but it was the Canadian ensembles alongside a couple other variables that really, I guess you could say, put this channel on the map. Because if I were to play back an old video of mine with Idalia and looking at her at least 10 to 11 days before she formed, this was something that we highlighted. In fact, you know what? What the heck? I'm probably going to lose viewers for doing this, but let's do it. Let's go ahead and let's take a look back in time for old time's sake. Let's go back to the YouTube studio, or actually let me go to your channel, and let's see. Let's go to videos, and we'll do oldest. And take a look at this. So right here, if you notice, this was the 2023 hurricane season is ready. Sunday tropical update. And notice I already had a little red box drawn there near our Yucatan channel. And then right here, if you look, what's that? Evening tropical update, more on the way. Hurricane Idalia major updates. And like I said, I believe that it was the Canadian ensembles that put us on the map. Because if you notice, 366 views. And then finally, once we really highlighted it, 28,000 views. And the next thing you know, fast forward a couple days, and there she is in red. So, it's definitely something worth watching. I'll mute this. Look at, there's baby David. there's David from way back when. Let's see if I have the Canadian ensembles in this video. Pretty sure I do. I don't see why I wouldn't pull it up. At this point in time, I think we had already gone past that point. But yeah, look at all that ensemble agreement right in that same familiar spot. So, and I'll close the video out before we bombard you guys with old videos. But, yeah, so I don't know. Am I really, really hyped up for a storm? Internally, yeah, I want us to track something. But am I fully confident just yet? Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. But the signals and the symptoms are coming together. And I noticed that on the latest run of the Canadian model as well, if you go through time, and we'll see what this looks like at 12 Zulu, but I'm noticing that there are some very, very faint whispers of really good vorticity trying to show itself down there over the south. So we'll see. We'll see if anything does spin up after all. But that's just about all she wrote. Do I have any questions in the chat? Would NHC put a yellow dot on the map by June? It depends. It really depends. Well, we are going into neutral and La Nina. That's my only explanation. I absolutely agree since it was extremely warm water. Thankfully, it wasn't over that water for too long, and we were in a very strong El Nino. Adalia did not strengthen more. Yeah, no, she was battling consistent wind shear as she moved through the Gulf, went through that eye wall replacement cycle at the last second, which saved the Big Bend area of Florida from a Cat 4 impact, which was good news. So she was in between cycles. I know that sounds weird, but she was in between cycles, and that's what more or less knocked it down just a little bit. Let's see. Weatherman Plus is saying that we are heading into a perhaps strong La Nina. Only time will tell. See, I don't know. I don't know about that strong La Nina anymore. We're seeing a lot of signals that we're going to stay in that weak to maybe somewhat moderate phase of La Nina. And that's something else we want to really pay close attention to. We're going to get one more run of all of our Climo data before we wander straight into the hurricane season head first, and we'll see exactly what's going to take shape around then. I believe, as a matter of fact, I saw something. Let me see. Enzo forecast 2024. We haven't looked at this in a while, but let's see. No, this isn't what I want. There is a chart that we used to pull up quite a bit. I'm not sure if I can find it right now. Let's see. Maybe this is it. Will this show it to us? This was April. I want to find May. I know May has to be out by now. Oh, okay. So they're still thinking La Nina. I could have sworn I saw a chart or a bar graph that actually had a bit more of our neutral gray bars here popping up just a little bit higher than what they are here. But maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm mistaken, maybe that was an older chart. But yeah, La Nina is still sneaking in. However, it looks like the general average for our cool anomalies they're going to sit somewhere between -5 and about -1, which would not put us into strong La Nina territory. So we'll see. Definitely time will tell. If we stay in a weak to moderate La Nina, that could spell bad news for our Atlantic basin. It could be a bit of a saving grace. Who knows? Could it become a rare June hurricane with the right conditions? It could. With the right conditions, absolutely. I mean, we have everything on the table to produce hurricanes early in the year. We really do. We have enough ocean heat content. We have enough hot water at the surface. We just need that upper level influence and that wind shear to taper off a little bit. And I feel if we were given the right amount of vorticity in the mid-levels, that first 5,000 to 7,000 feet of the atmosphere, and if we were just let it rip in an ideal environment across, say, the Caribbean or even the MDR, we would definitely get a hurricane. I could see that. It's not very common that we get that, but I could see it happening. Swear, it seems like every time it is said that Florida might get a good more of activity, we hear in Louisiana get slammed. We shall see. Our ensemble members of Euro meteorologists. Kathleen, excellent question. So the reason I like to look at ensembles more than I do regular models that far out in time is because ensemble members are individual, I guess you could say, little minds that are produced by that specific model. And the reason I put just a little bit more faith into ensembles and their level of agreement or consensus is because we, as meteorologists or scientists who program and ingest and digest the data into these models, can tweak the runs as they go through time. So there is that human element in it. They're not just like our operational models, the GFS, the regular Euro, Icon, Canadian, etc., to where they ingest data, analysis data at that hour, and then just run through the whole loop to their own, I guess, devices. Ensembles can be adjusted and tweaked as they go through time, and that's why they're a critical element for a lot of things if you're trying to predict something way out in time. What is wind shear looking like for this system? So the wind shear is definitely up in the air. The only model that we can really look at for wind shear, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be our GFS. If we come over to our Canadian ensembles, you notice the wind shear does start to back off right around when that system is trying to form. This would be a hostile environment for a tropical cyclone right here. We're looking at 40 to 50 knots of shear. Once you start to see it do this, This is where things get a little bit more favorable. This is where things definitely start to relax. You can still see wind shear, but notice it was nothing like last year, and at this point in time, we're sitting between 22 to 30 knots of wind shear. Still going to keep us rather disorganized, still going to keep us from really quickly intensifying. So if I were to put my best guess on a system out here, we would probably have a depression to a tropical storm, maybe weekend down, and then tropical storm, and then it'll just eject out. It wouldn't be anything really worth flipping out about, going crazy about. The Caymans will definitely have to watch. Jamaica would definitely have to watch. Cuba, not as much. The heavy rain threat would be an issue for them. The Bahamas would probably have to watch. We have very hot water, so it could try to re-intensify. But hypothetically speaking, this would more or less be some June disorganized attempt at a tropical cyclone that might try to get up towards Cindy and Brett territory of last year, 60 to 70 mile an hour winds, especially with this level of shear in the upper levels. We might not see a fully consolidated low. But that's a big if, and there's a lot of wiggle room in there as well. If we come over to our 0Z GFS, the 0Z GFS is thinking something totally different. The GFS is thinking very favorable, optimal environment down there in the Caribbean. Large anticyclone, very good indication that our Central American gyre is going to fire up. So there's going to be nothing but rising air through here that could help to really strengthen a storm. And as it moves in, if it does intensify between here and here, before it encounters whatever upper level shear could possibly be in its way, it'll actually create some structural rigidity about itself and prevent the wind shear from really knocking it down like we saw with Idalia last year. Once she organized enough and became a hurricane, closed off and had that tight vortex in its center, let's use working out as a metaphor. If you have a weak core and you try to squat, it might be difficult to maintain your stability as you go down and then come back up. If you train your core up and you develop a lot more of that trunk rigidity or that trunk stability as you go down, you can squat heavier without shimmying and feeling unstable. Kind of the same thing, maybe not exactly like that, but kind of the same thing with tropical systems since they are vertically stacked, warm core, even around all sides. As they concentrate and consolidate, they become a lot more stable and they can withstand things like dry air, wind shear, things trying to knock them down. Ian is a wonderful example. Ian was forecast to weaken because of a trough, upper level wind shear, dry air, and it didn't. It kept intensifying because it was closed off and it just fed off of the waters. That latent heat exchange was completely sealed around that eye wall, and that's what helped him continue to intensify as he made landfall. So for the folks out there who say dry air could kill the season, wind shear could kill the season, not in every instance. It can squash certain systems from ever getting going, but if we have a favorable area, let's say the GFS is right about this, if we have a favorable area like that Caribbean setup here, and we get something going and it can close up, consolidate, and kind of organize, wind shear and dry air won't be as much of a factor. Will it limit further intensification? Yes. Will it completely destroy it? No. That's just not how it works. If that were the case, we would never have hurricanes, we would never have anything, because the atmosphere is never perfect for these storms. It is never perfect. Sometimes, a lot of it really does come down to luck almost. These storms are lucky, and then during certain parts of the year, certain variables that would impede storm development are a little bit more relaxed than at certain times of the year. That's why August, September, and October really do get going. Our waters are the hottest. Our wind shear is more or less non-existent. The dry air or the dry, dusty air is no longer a big factor, so that's what it kind of comes down to. So the GFS is thinking, if you notice, our wind shear is really going to just back down for a good amount of time. At least that's what the GFS is thinking. There goes our anticyclone over the Caribbean. Caribbean becomes a very favorable region from right about the entry of June and further on from that point forward. If you come over to our European model, we can't see that far out in time just yet. But I do believe the Euro does kind of more or less, if you notice, try to pick up on some anticyclonic flow down there, but tries to bring in another TUT, another tropical upper tropospheric trough that might try to squash things. So very up in the air. What does the EPS think? The EPS going through. Yeah, the EPS does try to bring on an anticyclone as well, just a little bit further to the west. So we're maxing out our model runs, though, so we're not going to put a whole lot of allegiance and, a whole lot of faith in it. Is Nazario more excited about hurricane season than any other season? I would say so. Yeah, Sasha, I would say so. I've always been excited about hurricane season, though. Not just because of YouTube and social media. Ever since I was small, I was always excited about hurricane season, tracking the likes of Hugo, tracking the likes of Aaron, Floyd. Who else was out there? Charlie, Francis, Jean, Ivan was a big one. Just before that, there were a few other storms. Even when I was out in Western Conus and really not paying attention to the tropics out here, I was always paying attention to things like Dorian, to Irma, Maria, etc. So I do get excited about hurricane season, and I still remember talking with Tom Terry about a month ago, and even he loves hurricane season the most because it's it's a challenge. It's a really good forecasting challenge. It gets a little easy over time with pattern recognition for things like hail, tornadoes, strong winds, thunderstorms, but hurricane season is a whole other beast in terms of forecasting, and it's a lot of fun. It really helps you stretch your legs as a meteorologist. That's another reason why I have an admiration for it, and you get some of the most extravagant weather out of it, too. So I would say I get more excited about hurricane season than anything else. Plus, I'm in Florida, so yeah. Weather Girl Danny, thank you very much for joining in tonight. Today, this morning. Thank you for gracing us in the chat. I appreciate that. I am looking forward to winter snow. That is becoming more interesting for me because the heat is not fun. The heat is not fun at all. Did you ever want to experience Hurricane Maria at some point? Oh yeah, for sure. Francis is pretty dang bad. All that water, yes. Francis was a 2-3 day storm. She lingered around Florida, and the same with Jean. Jean took forever to get out of Florida as well. 2 to 3 day length storm. I thought he does lives at night. Well, I used to, Sasha. I did a Wednesday night live because my schedule, I had to tailor it to my schedule. I might start rotating. I feel like rotating would make it a little more difficult for you guys to consistently tune in as opposed to just having a routine time of day. But maybe we'll do some evening live streams as well, depending on what my schedule looks like and what we have going on here in the home or at the house. So I wanted to do a live this morning. I thought about doing a live this evening, but I figured it's Friday. I need to check with my work and see if I have Monday off, because if that's the case, I'm trying to go out and do something tonight, or let alone just relax with the family and get together with everybody and maybe order out or something like that. So that's no offense to you guys. I love everybody, but I wanted to take Friday evening and just kick back, especially as we get closer to June. I think June and from then on in, we'll definitely be working overtime, not only here on the channel, but everywhere else. Starting to incorporate more tropical updates on TikTok and yeah. And James, excellent point. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. That was more or less the battle rhythm. We would do just our normal updates, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And as I've mentioned before, we would only increase coverage if we have things going on. So then we would start incorporating like Tuesday night lives or doing dual live streams if it's really that big of a deal, and so on and so forth. But, yeah. And don't get me wrong, for my YouTube folks who've been looking at the severe weather and whatnot, too, I'm still watching that. I've just more or less really dedicated my TikTok to severe weather right now, since I know that this channel started to grow during the tropical season. We might be able to bring back a lot of our old viewers going back to the tropical Atlantic. Oh, this tornado season is just insane. It is sad. It is very sad, and we're already looking at the possibility of another big-time severe weather event as we go into this weekend, Memorial Day weekend, which would just be tragic for people out there. As a matter of fact, let's take a look. We're going to cut the live stream here in a second. I got to get ready for work, and I got to eat a little bit more. But yeah, there you go. As a matter of fact, right here, this is for Sunday, I think. This is day 3. Sunday, enhanced area right over the lower Midwest, lower Great Lakes area. Day 2, enhanced risk out there. And then today we have small pockets of enhanced, but a huge, once again, generalized area of level 2 out of 5 risk from the lower Great Lakes all the way down to the southern plains, the Dixie Alley, Texarkana area. So, whew, they are not getting a break. It makes you wonder if severe weather season knows it's going away and it's got to keep the spotlight on it for just a little bit longer before it's back to back hurricane season time. This is the day that I'm really concerned about, though, the day 3. Day 3 definitely seems like it's going to pop off some really significant activity. Let's pop on over to our GFS real quick, or let's go to the Euro instead. Let's do the European model instead of the WFS. 0Z European model. There's Saturday and then into Sunday. Oh, yeah, there we go. Another really consolidated low pressure moving through Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois. That is definitely not good. Definitely not good. Oh, man. I mean, that's more of a Missouri threat on this model run for sure, but still not looking good. Definitely not looking good. And I would argue for sure with as hot of the temperatures that we have out there, we're probably seeing some really, really gratuitous dew point and surface temps that'll really help to kick things off. Really solid dry air intrusion right behind that system as well. That'll help to really aggravate things, make things even worse. So severe weather is continuing. Hurricane season is coming, and we're going to make a very quick flip. There's not going to be any intermission. We're just going to immediately go from one side of the spectrum to the other. We may even have gigantic severe weather activity happening over the lower 48 with tropical season trying to get going. But alrighty, guys, it is 9:50. It is time to say bon voyage. And until next time, anybody like Bear in the Big Blue House? But hey, I say, well, that's okay, 'cause we'll see you very soon, I know. So we'll definitely touch base again on Monday, regardless if I have the day off or not. I'm really hoping I do. I believe Memorial Day should be an Advent Health observed holiday, so I don't see why I won't. But regardless, we'll still touch base. We might do a Monday night live stream if I'm off. You know, I'm leaning more towards doing a Monday morning live stream and just keeping that train rolling for consistency's sake. And then, as James also alluded to, building up momentum and doing evening live streams to cover our bases when things are actually going down. But we'll see. Next week is the home stretch of May. Once I see you guys again on Monday, that'll be the 27th. So we'll be right there towards the start of hurricane season. As we rotate, we could essentially say Friday is more or less the start of hurricane season, because the 31st, I might not see you guys on Saturday, or we'll do a specialty live stream on that Saturday. We'll see. Actually, you know what? I think we're traveling on that Saturday, going to visit relatives in North Carolina, so I'll have to see how I can facilitate that. But you guys are all awesome. You guys are wonderful. I love that the audience is growing. I love the fact that we're having very, very good conversation. That's probably my favorite part about doing these live streams, is everybody gets to talk and everyone gets to brainstorm, and we all get to collectively thinking, and that's what it's all about. As a collective group, it's up to us to really stay ahead of the storm. You know, we weather sources work hard to give you guys the information, but without you guys helping to spread that information, then we're just kind of speaking into the air, and it's not going to do anything. So, and yes, Hurricane Star I had to shave. I was in uniform the last couple of days. So every time I have to go in for the Navy, I got to get all baby-faced. Grows back pretty quick, though. I got a lot of peach fuzz already coming out. So, yeah, it'll be back very soon. It'll be back very soon. Sharon Tully, thanks again. Stay safe. And likewise to you, madam. How close are we, babyface Dave? 100%. I shave off 5 years. I look back in my mid-20s. But all right, guys, have a great start to your Friday. Have a good rest of your Friday as well, and I hope the weekend is superb. For our folks out there who may be tuning in from the Midwest, from the Great Plains, please be very, very weather aware and stay up on your severe weather sources, because I know there's a lot of folks who are going to be streaming consistently throughout the weekend, as well as your local National Weather Service, local National Weather Broadcasting as well, for any kind of updates and visual graphics that'll help give you and keep you ahead of the storm. If you have the means of doing so, follow me on my TikTok, because I'm definitely looking at severe weather and advertising that every single day. So if you want those severe weather forecasts trimmed down to a 2-3 minute time frame, definitely follow my TikTok at Weather Center Nazario, follow my X, follow my Instagram for more routine and repetitive updates. Please consider subscribing if you're brand spanking new to the channel. We have a lot of work to do as we move through this very extraordinary hurricane season, more or less, and we'll be talking again very soon. I definitely appreciate everyone's support, and oh man, Alfalfa Bill Enjoyer joining at the last second. Hey, and we'll see you later. So thank you everybody for tuning in. It's been a great time chatting with you guys. Maybe we'll have something bigger to talk about as we roll into the last week of May and into the beginning of June. I think next week, truthfully, if there is something to monitor in the Caribbean, we will start to see a greater signal. We will start to see more symptoms lining up. The dominoes will start falling in rapid succession. Right now, we're still a little far away. It's only May 24th. We're looking at June 4th and forward from there. So once we get into this time next week, early next week, Monday, Wednesday, we'll start to really get a feel for if it's going to happen, and we can start to build that confidence and start doing our own forecasts. But until then, guys, be safe, God bless, and enjoy your weekend, especially if you have an extended weekend with that Memorial Day holiday coming up. We'll see you again soon, and until next time, this is Weather Center.